All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to demystify how a boardroom's high-level strategic vision literally dictates the ground-level IT controls that protect financial audits. It's a genuinely fascinating chain of command, and understanding it is absolutely critical for anyone dealing with governance, risk, or auditing today. So think about this for a second. Can a single line of code actually compromise an entire financial audit? Well, absolutely. To understand why, we have to look at IT systems as way more than just operational tools. They are really an invisible armor shielding an organization's financial integrity. And, if that armor has even a tiny crack, the whole audit is at risk. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be quickly covering ERM and IT governance, King v. Principle 10, IT infrastructure, the difference between general and application controls, IT audit implications, and we'll cap it all off with some real-world IT failures. Starting with Section 1, ERM and IT governance. Let's look at the big picture of this invisible shield. If we're talking big picture, we have to start with enterprise risk management, or ERM. Basically, this is the process of treating risk as a core, integral part of making everyday business decisions. It's all about evaluating exposure and figuring out exactly how much potential loss an organization can realistically tolerate. It's risk appetite, essentially. ERM is a huge deal because modern technology exponentially increases both a company's opportunities and its financial reporting risks. Since modern businesses rely on digital systems for practically everything, it is absolutely essential for auditors to thoroughly evaluate these IT environments. And you can see how this risk appetite flows down in a pretty logical, structured loop. First, ERM spots the IT risk. Second, the governing body steps in and sets the policy. Third, the IT department actually implements the controls on the ground. And finally, the auditors come in to test if those controls actually work. It's a totally interconnected ecosystem. Moving right along to Section 2, King v. Principle 10, focusing on data and IT governance. What's really cool is how South Africa's King v. Corporate Governance Code formally nails down this responsibility. Principle 10 specifically states that the governing body has to govern data, information, and tech in a way that sustains and optimizes strategy. In plain English, the board of directors cannot pass the buck here. They are ultimately on the hook for ensuring IT aligns with business strategy and that all information stays completely reliable and secure. So governance definitely cannot be passive. The board literally has to roll up their sleeves and oversee the heavy hitters: cybersecurity strategies, data privacy, disaster recovery, and third-party risks. If a cloud provider suddenly goes down or a hacker breaches the network, the board is held accountable because their job is to prevent those severe financial and operational disasters. Okay, let's leave the boardroom for a minute and step right into the server room. Section 3, IT infrastructure and network components. It's no secret that modern organizations rely entirely on interconnected networks. Think local area networks, wide area networks, and cloud computing systems, just to process financial reporting. This means that network vulnerabilities, like cyber threats, downtime, or unauthorized access, directly elevate audit risk. Simply put, if the network isn't secure, the financial data traveling across it isn't secure either. Which brings us to Section 4, General IT Controls versus Application Controls. Let's look at these layers of protection. A great way to visualize how IT protects these networks is to think of general IT controls, or GITC, as the heavy locks on the front doors of a massive office building. They secure the overall environment. Application controls, well, those are more like the specific combinations to the individual safes inside that building. GITC secures the overall framework, while application controls ensure the accuracy of the specific transactions happening inside. So, drilling down into those front door locks, key general IT controls include things like logical access controls, user permissions and strong passwords. It also covers change management for software updates, continuity of operations, and systems development. If these front door locks are weak, unauthorized individuals could access the entire system. For an auditor, this is a massive red flag that dramatically increases the risk assessment because the whole environment is potentially compromised. Next, you've got those safe combinations, your application controls. These are split into input, processing, and output controls. Basically, your validity checks and automated math. For example, strong application input controls would completely prevent a scenario like the one we saw in the Faciorella Ltd case study. In that case, a senior manager forced a subordinate to input fake sales right before year-end to falsely inflate revenue. A robust application control, like strict segregation of duties or automated date locking, would stop that kind of ethical breach and audit risk dead in its tracks. Moving on to Section 5, the governance link. This is where we see how all these risks integrate. Because the crucial point here is how all these elements come together in real time. The King V Code specifically mandates the integration of technology and information risks right into company-wide risk management. Cyber risk is no longer just some abstract IT issue relegated to the basement server room, right? It is a fundamental enterprise risk that threatens the survival, the legitimacy, and the auditability of the entire business. Let's pivot slightly to the auditor's perspective. Section 6, IT audit implications, or how we evaluate this shield. Let's break down the reality for an auditor here. If the IT control environment is strong, meaning good GITC and application controls, boom, audit risk is low. The auditor can rely on the automated systems and massively reduce manual substantive testing. But if those locks are weak, audit risk shoots up to high. The auditor just can't trust the system's numbers and has to perform extensive, time-consuming manual testing. And if there's a major IT failure or a breach, the risk is critical. At that point, the auditor has to assume material misstatement and bring in the IT specialists. To really ground this, let's look at what happens when things actually go wrong in Section 7, real-world failures. Basically, what happens when the shield cracks. First up, Incident 1, a bank system data breach. Imagine weak logical access just lets hackers waltz right in. From an ERM perspective, this is a nightmare of reputational and legal damage. But look at the audit implication. Unauthorized access destroys the reliability of the bank's financial records entirely. The auditor can't trust the balances, meaning they have to do deep, substantive testing to verify the data. The board's governance response here has to be a total, top-down overhaul of cybersecurity policies. Or take Incident 2, a retail inventory system failure. Say a flawed software update completely messes up the inventory tracking. The IT failure is in change management and processing controls. If the system is calculating inventory incorrectly, the auditor can't just trust the automated stock counts. They're forced to go physically test and count the inventory manually because the risk of material misstatement is incredibly high. Then there's Incident 3, a payroll system error. This happens when application controls fail. Without automated input completeness checks, ghost employees or incorrect salary math can easily skew the financials. The audit implication is a materially inaccurate payroll expense sitting right on the income statement. To fix this, governance has to step in and enforce strict validation checks and segregation of duties within the application itself. And finally, Incident 4, cloud system downtime. The general IT control failure here is inadequate continuity of operations and backup strategies. If the cloud goes down and there are no backups, the business literally stops. For the auditor, if they can't access the financial data, they simply cannot issue the audit report. This perfectly illustrates how an IT infrastructure failure instantly becomes a massive corporate governance and auditing crisis. Which brings us to one final, pretty provocative thought to leave you with. If your organization's IT controls failed today, would your financial statements actually survive the audit tomorrow? Remember, the strength of your corporate governance determines the strength of your IT shield, and ultimately, that shield determines the trust the public can place in your financial reality. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.